It's a machine, and you'll know that by any major corporation that you work for when it specializes in the industry.
What is up, guys? Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen. I just appreciate all you guys for the love and support. As you see, we got a special guest today, and something that I absolutely just can't explain the joy it is to be on a podcast and have a guest to be able to share their story. So I just appreciate not only him for being up here today, but y'all for watching. And without further ado, if he'll introduce himself, and then we'll get right into it.
Right on. My name is Kelby McIntosh. I'm a culture solutions journalist in the great state of California, specifically Humboldt, California, north of the Bay Area, behind the Redwood Curtains. Other than that, I just try to highlight marginalized and black and brown voices to the best of my abilities.
Thank you. All right, Kelby, we're gonna start off real slow and nice and easy. My first question for you is, what exactly do you do? Uh, I know that you have a podcast from what you told me, but just for the people, what is it that you do on that podcast? What is it that you do as a career?
Yeah, so from a career standpoint, I'm a journalist, specifically audio journalist. So I work at the radio station as a producer. Not only do I host a radio show, I also produce radio shows as well. One of the shows that I help produce and host is called the 23%. It's a show that focuses on the actual 23%, which represents the color the communities of color up here in Humboldt. For whether it's the negative things that they experience, racism, prejudice, and those kinds of things, or also to the positives they experience, how they're thriving out in the community, the businesses they build, the families that they create, and just life as a person of color behind the Redwood Curtain. I do have a podcast. That podcast is called Feeding the Albatross, which is completely different from my day to day. Whereas my day to day is more still structured news. It's more loose news than anything
Mm,
else. Feeding the Albatross is more focused on the journalism experience. So it's like my take on the industry, what it means to navigate the industry as a black man, and all to the soundtrack of just a bunch of different lo-fi and hip-hop music, or just whatever I'm feeling for the moment when telling these kinds of stories. But yeah, that's my career and my show.
I think it's so interesting because as you were talking, I'm thinking about it, and it's for not only for me, but for anybody else that's watching that might think of doing what you're doing. Um, it's really creative to be able to talk to you and inspiration at that. Because for me myself, I'd like to be a journalist, but not so in the terms of going out and discovering what's in the world, but more so just covering general basis, but also spreading truth and light. And not only that, as you were talking about being a black male, I think that's also another thing because there's representation, but now as we get into more of a diverse community in the world, we learn that not as much as there should be is there a black voice on TV screen. It's normally just, okay, this is the white show, and then, not to be rate analyze one race, but it's the white show, and then you got, your sprinkle of black people here and there, and even then it's black people that are very reserved and not outspoken as they should be. And so I just think that's really awesome that me and you are talking right now, because not only does that give me kind of like okay, this is what to experience, or, this is something to avoid, or, well, this is going to be my take and how I go through. So I just appreciate that. Uh, what was it like? What inspired you to pursue what you do, not only for the podcast, but as a career?
Oh man, that's a good question. Honestly, I got into this industry by accident. My career was more focused in art than anything else. I started out as a comic book artist, more than anything. And when I was in college, my professor said that I needed to get a certain amount of credits in order to graduate for art.
Hmm.
And I had to get that through an internship. And at the time, art internships just weren't really prevalent like that. And so I actually had a homie that worked for our local hip hop station out in Marshall, Texas, where I'm from. And they needed flyers made for an event that they were throwing, and he knew because I was an artist, it just kind of meshed. And so I came in, designed some flyers, and to, I guess, appreciate what the work that I've done, he put me on air at the time, and he was doing, I think it was like the Thursday night show or something like that. This was a club night essentially, and so he brought me on, and I got onto the mic with him and learned his process, studied how he was just switching tracks and flowing in and out of different stories and everything else. And I just fell in love with what he was doing. So much so afterwards we had a big in-depth conversation about just radio and how it works, how the industry is. And after that, I switched majors completely from art to actual broadcast journalism and mass communications. And after that, like the rest was history. I got my degree filled in that. I went back to school, got my bachelor's in that, and I just started working in the industry as an intern. I started out doing sports for ESPN, did some stuff for NBC at some point, and but it was so the gap was so far from covering communities and the stories that I wanted to tell versus like these are big companies, so the
Mm.
recognition and the branding is more on a national and sometimes global scale, which is not a bad thing if you're on the come up. But for me, I really wanted to bring it back home to the more relatable stories that I know the listeners would be hearing and reading and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's what got me into the industry as a just a snapshot.
That's what's up. Uh, to piggyback off of that, we all what I see most of the time is, especially when I was in high school, well, freshly out of high school, and trying to get into college, I saw so many this career is regretted, or so many people dropped out of this course just because it felt like they didn't get enough of what they wanted. You being in mass communications and journalism, I see that a lot for us as a major. It's more so, well, I didn't think this is what it was going to be. And so now I got to go find a different major because, well, I don't want to do this anymore, or it just doesn't fit the lines of what I desire. What about you? What was your first intake on, you know, necessarily your experience when you first got into to now being uh, more dipped into the water and understanding what it is like and what you do?
Yeah. Um, I think it is easy to see the industry as one scope. Like when people think journalism, they think about I hate to use the phrasing, but they think about the big three, right? Audio and video more than anything else.
Mhm.
But in actuality, like the branches of the industry just splinters off into so many different paths. There is a lot of overlap in some instances, but the honest answer of what I always tell people on the come up is if you'll always be told there's no money in journalism kind of thing. You'll always be told that. And to some degree, like they're not wrong. But where you do find the money at is being diverse in your skills and being behind the audio or behind the camera, like learning production, learning editing, those kinds of things. Um, I had a preconceived notion of what I thought the industry was. I thought when I got into it, I was doing a lot of network stuff, so a lot of camera stuff, and I thought I wanted to actually be on camera, be the anchor or whatever the case is, until I realized, like, nah, I actually don't like being in front of the camera like that. But where I found my niche and what helped me kind of shine and really thrive in this industry was learning, like, as I said, production, learning editing, because I realized from an early standpoint in my time of being in this industry, I love making things sound great. I love setting a tone, setting a mood, whether it's through the writing of the script or even like how the script is tracked or tracked meaning like recorded. Like that's it,
Mhm.
kind of like the industry term. And you can set those moods by the music that you use, the stories that you tell. There's all these different factors. And what I like to tell people is the more niche you get, the more of an audience you will build. This is one of those industries to where it's like you can be very general, kind of like how the news is. Like if you turn on C-SPAN or NBC, like it's super general because it's
Mm,
world, it's local, it's all these kind of different layers to the content they're producing. Whereas as you, a podcaster, and all the upcoming podcasters, the more niche you are, the more you're tapping into a market that will garner more relatability and fans more than anything else. And that's the part of the industry to where I wanted to learn and thrive in. And a lot of journalists kind of have this cycle, what they call the life cycle of a journalist. You do hard reporting, you after hard reporting, if you don't like reporting, you might go on to do international correspondency and all these kinds of things. But if you don't like reporting, a lot of journalists revert to being editors. And if you don't like editors, like being an editor, a lot of journalists report to producing or production. And if you just don't like none of that, some people go to the marketing side of journalism, which is PR.
mhm.
And you'll find that if you tap into the PR market of understanding who's operating in it, 9 times out of 10, maybe don't quote me so exact, but I will definitely say for sure I can put money on that. Most likely, most of the PR people have come from the journalist field, as because it just helps for a strong marketing and writing background at the end of the day. So there's money to be made, and I think that's the biggest misconception. But as for me and my experience is concerned, I like being in this space of podcasting, just because it allows me to be a lot more creative. It allows me to have diversity within my niche brand of topics, and it gets to connect me with creators such as yourself. And I think that's really dope.
It is. It is. Before we go any further, I like to. I've had a little debate about this question because I feel like there's a difference between these two, and I, from the sounds of it, you've dipped your toes in both of them. What do you think the difference between regular journalism, so like, and more so on the aspect of when you're looking for a major and you know you want to do these types of things? So, what's the difference between journalism and broadcast journalism?
Um, I mean, journalism and broadcast journalism, they're outside of like the mediums, they're really the same thing. You're telling the same stories. The only difference is just how you're going about it is really it. Because most people consider journalism like traditional print. So it's
Mm,
just like how you write the article, your lead, your introductory quote. They have what is called the phrase is like they call it a nut graph, which is the breakdown of the why you're as a reader you're reading this story from how the journalists write it. And
mm,
then you have like the body, and then you have a kicker, which is like the quote that kind of wraps up the whole story kind of thing. In
mm,
podcast and broadcast journalism, I would say there's more differences kind of there than anything else, but even then they still work on the same spectrum. We're still telling stories, we're still explaining to the listener why this story is important, maybe
right.
through highlighting a specific topic, or maybe through highlighting a specific guest that can speak on a topic more than anything else. And through the conversation, the listener is made aware to why this topic is important. And normally, whether it's a broadcast journalism story or a podcast episode, there's always kind of like that last kind of kicker that kicks the listener out to let you know, like, oh, we're done. Whether it's like the whole like, share, subscribe kind of conversation, or like the guest is plugging their most recent thing, or whatever the ending of a podcast episode is kind of different between every individual and the brand itself. But overall, like between your question, like journalism and broadcast journal, there's really no difference. It's just how the subject is tackled more than anything else.
You know, uh, I know I asked this question, when we were talking and I was introducing myself, and you just spoke on it a little bit. Uh, and I think that's pretty interesting. And you said you don't like to, talk about it too much, but as you were telling me, I was just like, yo, that's kind of cool. Uh, but I'm going to generalize the question. Tell us some of your experiences that you've had within journalism, such as ESPN.
Yeah. Working at ESPN, it's a machine. It's a machine, and you'll know that by any major corporation that you work for when it specializes in the industry. Um, it is a lot of long hours. I will not lie to the listeners and watchers who want to work for these kind of big names. It is a lot of long hours. You'll be working 12 to 18 plus hour days. You have to eat, sleep, and breathe the brand. And you have to eat, sleep, and breathe your beat. And by beat, I mean the subject that you're assigned to, whether that's basketball, football, hockey, golf, even maybe some of the obscure sports, water polo, and there's so many. Working for ESPN, I've found out there's a lot of sports out there outside of the major ones that we hear about, kind of thing. But it's a machine. It's constant. That's constantly running. So you will be constantly running, and depending upon whether you're the host, the producer, fact checker, there's teams dedicated to the content of the shows that get produced, whether it's radio, whether it's stuff for YouTube, their social media platforms. It's a machine, and it's good because if you can navigate that machine to and like really make something of that opportunity, you can actually navigate into other prime names. I've known people that I've interned with that intern with at ESPN that work at Complex and they work at Vice and they work at all these other major stations and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very doable thing. Not saying it's not doable at all, and I definitely don't want to discourage anyone from taking their shot at trying to work for the machine. But for me personally, it's not what I wanted my work life to be like. I
Mhm.
appreciate the opportunity for what it was, and I can see the value in it, and it definitely did add value to my career as a producer than anything else. But you'll be sacrificing a lot. And for me, I kind of like work life balance now, more so than anything else. Maybe back then, fresh out of college, I didn't really care too much about it. But now, where I'm at in my life, in my career, I prefer to be deeper within the community. Like those kinds of connections are much more rewarding. But as an upstart within the industry, use those opportunities for sure use them and use them to level up into other things that you want to do. Like don't think just because you're in audio or just because you're in print there's no crossover, because there is a misconception to think like you're stuck in one thing, and that's not the case within this industry. You can always use one to get into the other easily.
Are you more so of a you are you work under the chain type person? So you like to be, I wouldn't say directed, but more so follow under a leader sort of kind of, or you like a CEO type, you like to run, you like to do it for yourself, but with around and other people like minded like you.
That's a really great question. Honestly, I've never been asked that question before, so kudos. um in some instances, I rather play my part and be a support character. Like far as like within my job, I work at a radio station out here in Humboldt, KMUD, KMUD, and I'm just a producer. Like I don't have to worry about anything else. Like I
Mhm.
just worry about the production of the shows that I produce for. I worry about the production of the show I run. I work with the corresponding members that help, such as like my co-producer and my editor kind of thing. And that is great. Like that's I just have to focus on one thing. I think when it comes to being like the entrepreneurial spirit is really great, and when you're running from something for yourself, it is a lot more hats to wear, but you also have to think about the reward that comes to the end. When it came to like my podcast and things that I was doing outside of K Mud, I approached it very simplistically. Like
Mhm.
I just approach it from the creative space of I just want to do this show because it's fun kind of thing. When in actuality, it's just like I had to start as the show started gaining traction. I had to start switching my mind to being more business oriented kind of thing, which meant more and more things that I had to take on. I like it. I do, just as much as I just like having the one thing that I worry about. But I know for me and my future, at the end of the day, for me, I would rather run something than versus just continue to be um just as the producer. It works for some people. I won't knock that at all. It does work because it's simple. It keeps work life balance. But for me and what I foresee for myself, eventually my goal is to actually be running a production company.
I would say the same thing. As you were talking about it, you were just hitting a lot of key points where it's like I won't say I have a lot of hats to wear now, but as I dibble and dabble, I'm like I didn't think, and even then I think I started when I was 15, so 2020, and at that time I'm like okay, and this was around COVID, so I'm like I want to do something for fun because I need something to pass the time. But as I got older, and now I'm like, yo, this is not what I thought it was. It's a lot more serious, and not in the
Yeah.
sense of you know be a businessman, but more so because of what I do and what I want to do, and because it's a business, I have to understand that what I'm doing is not just for me anymore, but it's for those that are watching, those that are listening, because what they're going to see is how do I take myself up as not only a person, but as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster? How do I build myself up? And when they look at that, it's well, is this still going to draw an audience? Is this still going to produce something? And even then, you have people like you said that are going to watch this and they're going to take that and then be like, well, because of the way he carries it, because of the way he does it, I don't think that's something for me. So now it's like, that is a lot. That's a lot of responsibility, but at the same time, it's a fun responsibility. It's an enjoyable
Yes.
responsibility because at the end of the day, it's, hey, I really loved your podcast episode. I enjoyed it. I want to see more. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest joy that you can get from podcasting and being by yourself, but according to the community, as you were saying.
It is. It is because there's times to where like I've went out grocery shopping and people be like, "Oh, you did that thing on the radio." Like I felt seen and heard when you said such and such. It's such a relatable experience. Or
Mm-hmm.
there's times where people have listened to like my podcast and they'll be like, "Oh, thank you for highlighting this kind of thing. I never saw it from this kind of perspective." And I wholeheartedly agree with you. The reward that comes from it, whether it's sponsors, the acknowledgement from the community, whatever that reward looks like it's such a good feeling because you made something from your own hands, and maybe that's like really super southern of me to say, but that's how my grandpa is. He's like, you made it from your own hand, so it holds a
Right,
different type of value
right,
kind of
right.
thing, right? And so like what the first thing that I learned when I was in your position, because my podcast that I actually started in during the pandemic is what got me the where I'm at, like from doing PR at Facebook and just being a real true cog in the machine to
Mm.
taking a podcast that I was just really just trapping out the bedroom, to be honest, with this podcast. And
We understand that. Yeah.
it got me to where I'm at. Like it got me acknowledgement from my local radio stations, and it brought me on and got me a producer gig kind of thing. And that's to my point earlier. No matter what you're doing, you can always leverage it into better opportunities, even if not you're not well versed. Learn how to become well versed. Like one of the things I always did was, and this is a tip for anyone who's listening, like if there's something that you like from a podcast standpoint, don't listen to it as a fan. Listen to it as with an ear to understand why you like it. Maybe it might be how they transition into topics. Maybe it might be how the episode is produced, the music. Maybe it might be what the whole concept of the show is per se. But listen to it and see how you can replicate that sound. And that's what I did for Feeding the Albatross. I listened to a lot of podcasts that I liked, and I started like, oh, I like how this person did this, or oh, whoever did the production for this, I like how they faded this music out. Start trying to incorporate those things, push yourself beyond the limit, and it will craft a better product every time, because from an industry standpoint, that's what people listen for. Like they listen to, like, yeah, they listen for the content, but every industry person and every like sponsor and brand person, they listen to it with a critical ear to understand like not only how you talk about it, but also to like how the information is delivered. Does it make them feel something? Or what we'll say in the industry, is it snappy? Is it snappy? Does it get to the point? Does it cover my editor always says the phrase of like, does it cover the inverted pyramid? And it's our way of saying like, does it hit the who, what, when, where, why, but
Yes.
does it do it in a creative way, kind of thing. And so that's always my tips, like for giving. And I have so much more I can give when it comes to upstarts and everything else, just because like, though I've garnered experience and yeah, I'm deeper within the industry, I'm still learning. I never place myself outside of like not being a student, because there's always so much you can learn when it comes to this industry. And as long as you listen with a critical ear and you cherry pick these things and you always push yourself, you'll make it to where I'm at, and probably even more so, even way past me. That's my goal. I hope anyone listening to this, they beat me in the industry, like make it further than what I did, kind of thing.
I think that's one of the coolest things, especially as you were talking about it. Podcasting is like one of the craziest but most simplistic things you can do. And I say that because podcast it's when I look at it, podcasting is you find something you interest you, you find what you like, and you go from there. But at the same time, because what podcasting is, the technology, the environment, so much changes at one snap of a finger that it
Right.
you just have to be able to jump on the gun of okay, this is what I gotta happen. And that's what makes it interesting is now you're learning different ways to do different things. Now you're meeting different people. You're talking about these different standpoints that you never would have thought of. And that's what I wish I had heard when I was younger, that you have to be able to take what you know and put it somewhere else and then put it back to into what you know. Because meaning I have to take what I know about podcasting, take it to this place, like, okay, this is what I know, this is how they do it. Okay, those are the similarities. And then be like, realize, oh, wait, no, they do that differently, even though they do the same thing, and then bring it back. Okay, now how do I want to do it? So it's not copying, but it's, at the same time, it's still making, like you said, creatively what I want to do and what makes me happy at the same time, something that's going to draw in the audience. And now it's crazy that you said that because I was like, yo, that's like what I'm going through now is dibble dabbling in different things, learning different things, but at the same time, making it creatively what I want it to be and creatively making it so that the audience likes it. So that's
Right.
crazy that you said that.
Right. And it's wild because like I approach podcasts like how I approach art. Like I'll do a little bit and look at it from the back, like look at it from far away, touch it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit and keep on like really perfecting it, kind of thing. And like this, like Feeding the Albatross is probably like the fifth podcast I created.
You you've been through that phase. I've been through that phase too. I got like had so many times where I'd be like, I want to do this one, and then be like, never mind, I don't like it anymore. I want to do this one, never mind, I don't like it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. It and I'm not saying like all the other ones that I created were bad or anything like that. I do think those shows fit a moment in my life that
Mm-hmm.
I needed to like really express and put out there kind of thing. But I do feel like my current show is an amalgamation of all the best parts of each one. And it took
Mm-hmm.
a while for me to get to that point. And it even took a time like stepping away from it and learning some industry techniques just to help like add to it some more and to make it feel like a much more enriching experience in what I had envisioned for myself. Like, and with feeding the albatross, I still keep it loosey goosey. Cause I never wanted to feel stiff. Like it's news and information and music, but it's still, I never wanted to feel stale or stiff. But there are some methods to the madness that
Right.
I have learned while crafting that show, to where I would not approach another show ever the same way without using some of these methods learned, such as like, even if you're niche and you have a specific thing that you always talk about. Let's just say, for instance, it's sports, just for shits and giggles. I'm sorry, like I don't know if language is a thing out here. I
You're
can I
good.
can okay, right on. But let's just say it's we won't even say in general sports. We'll just say it's football, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so many teams to football, and there's so many controversies and politics to football kind of thing. But then as a podcaster, you might take it even further down the rabbit hole. You could literally just do a podcast about your
Mm-hmm.
team and whatever that team is. If you're to do a show about that, highlight all the things and all the questions that people say about your team, good and bad, and turn each one of those things and turn each one of those questions or responses into an episode. So
Mm-hmm.
that way, like you're structuring, like, even though, yeah, it might be about the Eagles or the Raiders or the Niners, whatever your team is, but you'll have these structured points that are now episodes, to where you can bring on sports writers, you can bring on other fans who have bigger fan bases than you, or you could even take those episodes that you talk about and pitch those to your local radio station. Like, when I learned how to properly structure a season, like a batch of episodes, like a season of episodes for my show, like, it changed the game completely, because I knew what I was working on.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what kind of guests I needed to get, because sometimes, like, you see the people throw out like this big fishing net
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when it comes to getting like guests and content. And sometimes you might get a guest and it's just like, oh, they're not a great speaker, or like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that was just not a great interview kind of thing. But to prevent that, structure out your show, know what you're talking about, and therefore you can accurately, like, precisely pinpoint the right guest to get
Right.
for that particular episode. And it just makes the process so much easier, because even in your position, when I was learning this whole craft, I was wondering, like, how are people just on the money? Like, it just
Right.
feels like something happens and then it's like boom, they already have an episode like the next day, or in some instances a couple of hours after the topic kind of dropped. It's
Mm-hmm.
because of how they struck their well-oiled machine. Is because of how they structure their show and their season. They're able to actually just jump in the booth, find the right person to talk about it, or in some cases they have co-hosts. Grab their co-hosts, and they're able to just rip out that content, because everything else is well fine tuned and structured to where you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it. That's also what helps with like distribution, branding, marketing. Like, all these things are tied together, but it starts with your show first. Not, and that sounds kind of corny to say, like some wax on, wax off kind of Karate Kid type stuff, but it's true. Like, it starts
Right.
with
Right.
your show, like how your show structure is done and how like well organized it is. It makes everything, distribution, marketing, getting those big brands, hell, just getting brands in general. Just easy.
I completely understand you. This and like you said, that's what I'm going through now. But not to keep you too long, not to keep you too long. Just a couple more questions. What's the one of my last coming to last questions is what's the biggest opportunity that you had to reject that you really wanted? And I said that kind of fast. What's the biggest opportunity you had that was given that was offered to you that you rejected that you actually deep down inside really wanted, if there is one?
Opportunity that I had, I rejected, but I really wanted it. Um, yeah, so this was around the time of creating my third podcast. It was called Alone on the Couch. It was covering the mental health and experiences of people that work in the journalism industry. Like, because just kind of some context, like as a journalist, and most journalists, we probably see about 50 stories a day, like that don't make it to air or to print or anything like that. And whether you're covering racism, whether you're covering crime, all these kinds of things, like we're still human at the end of the day, and
Hmm.
we have our own opinions, we have our own thoughts, we have our own moral compass. And so I did third podcast called Alone on a Couch, which was essentially just me talking to other journalists about our experiences and how we handle them, and just what these experiences have led to, whether positive or negative outcomes. NPR approached me for the show because they really liked it. I did it in their podcast. It was They had a podcast incubator pitch program or something like that. They really liked it, and they thought it was enough for it to where it didn't need to sit in the incubator too long. It's something they could just throw immediately out on air. And they gave me a number. We'll just say they gave me a number in negotiation, and it was a
Hmm.
good number, but it just wasn't what I felt it was my worth. And I rejected the deal, kind of thing. I don't regret the rejection. I just regret that they didn't see the value of it. And at the time, I really wanted to be on a major, like, kind of platform. And and for NPR to see the show for what it is, I thought was great. Um, it was a beautiful feeling, but how the negotiations went, it didn't work. But I definitely wanted to be on NPR, but just not like that.
Shoot. My last question for you as we wrap it up is what is the biggest takeaway that you've starting technically speaking, starting from college, going to the pandemic, starting your podcasting, and then now in this dabbling in your toes of talking to the community, being able to uh, connect, and then also including ESPN and all that, the before stuff before your podcast now. What is your takeaway in general on your experiences? And what is your advice to those that are, again, wanting to come into this aspect of journalism, podcasting, or journalism in general, whether it be ESPN, NBC, CBS, whatever that is?
Yeah. Um, my experiences are, whoo, the takeaway that I can definitely say from my experiences are it has taught me how to advocate for yourself. Because sometimes you can get into these rooms and you definitely feel like you're swimming in a pool full of sharks, but stand your ground more so than anything. And advocating, and there's nothing wrong with advocating for yourself to know your worth. If you're on the extreme business side of things and you're getting these offers, or if you're at the upstart and you want to get these offers, like, start having a number in mind. Like, understand that at the end of the day, this is an industry to where a lot of people don't get paid the most money for, but you can get paid, especially if you put the work in. So start thinking of a number, know your worth, and be on the ground to see everything as not only within your own experiences as a story, but also the things within your community. If there was advice that I can give to those in the industry, wanting to be in the industry, or just looking towards things past the industry, I would definitely say for any of those individuals, like, stand your ground. Know that as you transition in, come into, you'll always have critics. You can't please everybody with the content kind of thing. Just make sure you're proud of the content,
Yeah.
and structure and organize everything. Systems and processes sounds very corporate. It sounds not fun, but I promise you guys, putting a proper system and process to your show, your article, or whatever you do, it's gonna make things so much easier for when it comes to distribution, marketing, pitching, and all those kinds of stuff. And the most important thing that I would tell anyone who's in the upstart: find a good editor. Like, this, the fastest you can get editing off your plate if you do it all, or if find a good editor, like, off rip. That, like, an editor is an unsung hero to anyone's show. Find a good editor. But yeah, that's all I got. Other than that, have fun
Thank you.
podcasting.
Yes. Before we go ahead and shout out your podcast and everything that you do, where they can find you, Instagram, all the socials, and then
Oh,
especially what your career now. Where for any, I'm not sure if it's is your radio show, is it just locally or is it nationally or?
it is right now, it's locally, but we are working on putting it on all the platforms to where it can be heard. So no matter where you're at and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you'll be able to listen to the 23%. We should have the RSS feed up this week, but don't quote me on that because that's up to the technical guy more than anything else. But Feeding the Albatross is actually out on all popular stations. So wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever. Well, I don't think Apple. I think they cut their podcast division. But wherever you listen to it, you can listen to Feeding the Albatross. And if whatever the case is, you feel like following the lifestyles of a humble black journalist out here in Northern California, you can follow me at KB McIntosh. That's MCI, not MAC. Please don't get it confused. But yeah, that's it. KB McIntosh underscore KB McIntosh on all social platforms. At the end of the day,
That's what's up. That's what's up. Well, guys, I thank you for taking the time to join in. Thank Kelby. I thank you for just coming in and sharing your experiences and your story. I appreciate you and just the wonderful story that you've shared. I plan to talk to you more. You were definitely interesting, and I definitely could grab a lot from you. Um, for all those that are watching, Kelby's fans, my fans, we appreciate you guys. We love you. I can't help but say this was such a wonderful experience, and I just thank you guys for taking the time to listen. This is Nate, and you're just watching another podcast episode of The Talking Block. Peace.
peace.